this morning with COVID-19 procedural guidance. I see we have a lot of folks who are still trying to join us, but in the interest of time, we are going to go ahead and get started. This is Dawn Schaefer, and we also have Andrew Guillen.
Good morning, everybody.
And we're going to be walking you guys through this morning. Please note everybody is muted so that we can move through our content today. But you will have an opportunity towards the end to have your mics on and raise your hand and chat with us. And many of you are noticing the chat bar is open, so you can also put any comments or questions you might have as we go through this morning in the chat window. Andrew's going to go ahead and get us started.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. As Dawn mentioned, I'm Andrew Guillen, manager for Due Process and Special Education Services. Just to get us started with the information, we know that we probably won't get everybody fitted into this room. There's about 250 spots, so we pretty much max out at that point. Just to let you know, it will be recorded, or it is recorded today, and we will post it on the OSCI training site by noon tomorrow. So let's talk a little bit about some Blackboard Collaborate standards for this particular meeting. So just remember, if you have any technical issues, this will be recorded. If you can work them out with your T-Spec or your SPITs, that would be great. You can also contact the IT service desk. You'll want to make sure that you're using Chrome as your web browser, and that once you're in the session, your audio and video settings should be turned off. And I can't say it enough, it'll just kind of help us just make sure that we are muted for now. We are going to give you an opportunity to enable your mics and to post chat messages in the window. And just remember, all 200 of us or 250 of us can see the chat, so make sure you're using your professional language. I'll try my best too, especially if my boss is on the line. All right, so this is our agenda for this morning. I'm going to go ahead and have you take a peek at it. Clearly, there's a lot of information here to go over. I think one of the most important things is number 8, self-care. We do have a lot going on, so we're going to also take time at the end to talk about that self-care, because without it, we can't do our jobs. All right, so for this week, you have probably seen a few of these slides that we're going to share coming up. They were shared with your school team at the beginning of this week. And what we thought we would do is we would kind of take the opportunity to say, well, for us as special educators, what might be our role in supporting schools? So you're getting the central office training. And we're also going to talk about when OSEPS will post some office hours and things like that. But I think the thing to talk about right now is that flexibility, understanding that teachers need to be providing that distance learning and providing those procedural obligations that we're going to get into, but how will it look during this time? So just like you saw early in the week, FCPS is guiding principles for learning and wellness during distance learning. And I wanted to take a few minutes. We're not going to spend too much time on this slide. At 253 people, it'll get hard, but what I will do is let's take about a minute or so and let's think about this question. What is your role in assisting with guiding principles for learning and wellness during distance learning as a special educator? And what I'll do is I will go ahead and enable the audio, and if you raise your hand using the little button down at the bottom. I will take 3 comments, but I just want to hear, what do you think you're going to be able to do as a special educator in terms of wellness during distance learning? Oh, okay, Stacy, go ahead.
With the kids and maintain that contact and that structure. Probably
Okay.
is not working very well. Maintaining the structure with the kids and contacting the families to create some sessions with them.
All right. And kind of thinking a little bit about and how we might be providing some support during that time. Thank you. Jessica from Willow Springs has her hand up. Go ahead.
I think providing support to general education teachers and specialists, and providing multiple entry points for students and access to all the information they're going to be posting online. Sometimes that special ed perspective can open up just different ways that we're going to be instructing and collecting information.
Thank you, Jessica. I agree with that, and we're going to kind of show you how it will look while we're in distance learning. And, you know, while we are responsible for providing faith, we will definitely have some challenges, but I think we're going to overcome them. Does we have one more person who wants to provide input, or are we going to move on? You raise your hand.
What is she putting in? What in the world?
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Nobody can get into the site.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. I'm not able to get into the site, but people are referring. People, I guess, are chatting, and I'm only doing this via phone.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I don't think we can get in because either it's capped, so I got on really early, or because they sent it over Internet Explorer, and it only Blackboard Collaborate only works on Chrome. So I mean, they should have sent out the link, not press here. You can't launch it from Outlook.
He said at the beginning there was a cap at 200 people. So if you got on after
okay.
200, you weren't, you wouldn't be able to see it.
Well, and Aaron Wallace, Brenda and I were on it, but now we're not hearing it. So I think either we got kicked off or they shut down or something, because we were on it and we were hearing it, and now we hear nothing.
No one can hear anything, but we can hear you guys.
I can see it. They're asking everybody to mute everything, like mute your phones, mute your mic.
Oh. All right, I'm just going to watch. They're recording this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I'm going to use my time in other places and just watch it on recording.
Hi, everybody. This is Dawn. Can you hear me? Excellent. I see about 50 yeses. Good. Andrew, your mic went out about 5 slides ago, so we're not able to hear what you're saying. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to go. Yep, stop there, Andrew. Thank you. So we talked about distance learning, and that was when we had the conversation. I'm going to walk us back through now that I've got sound. We talked about the continuity of learning, and I know Jess and a couple of other folks who had raised their hand to speak had said, providing that continuity and that communication and that sense of normalcy was important. And I know you all have seen some of these slides in your schools, so we just thought it was important to revisit a little bit from this perspective. So, as you know, at the elementary level, we're working towards more teacher-directed, and I know you all are receiving a lot of training in that. But what I want to point out is those office hours. We're anticipating that some of those office hours that you all have in your schedules will be what you're using to do some of these meetings that may be required. And so looking at that sample schedule, and if that schedule is too small for you, if you double click on it, you'll be able to make it a little bit bigger to see. In any visual that we use today, double clicking on it will help. So elementary, that 1:45 to 3 o'clock might be that time frame where you may be holding meetings, but we do want to emphasize that we do need to be flexible, and it may be that we might have to hold a meeting at some other point in time. Yep, thanks for circling that, Andrew. So you guys got to this session likely through that DSS trainings and office hours on the OSEI intranet page. I do want to point out that OSEPS will also hold office hours, and those will be hopefully published today. As you might imagine, our folks who are posting things online have their hands a little full, so there's a little bit of a backlog there. It's time to pivot, and those of you who are over 35 would get this reference. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do for special ed in 504 at this time. So looking at this triangle, this references a lot of what you guys have already seen. So let's talk about the blue area. We're developing a letter that would go to parents called a temporary learning plan. Our expectation is that all special ed students, families would receive that via email, and it would include an outline of what we'll be providing during this time. And we're working on that letter. It's still in the approval process. You will eventually see a copy of it, Lauren. Thanks for asking. It's coming. We've been likening this difficult time to building the plane while we're all sitting in it and flying it. So we are working on that. That letter will outline the services and the goals and the accommodations that the student will receive during this time. I do want to just make sure we've all kind of shifted that paradigm to understand that this is not, services are not going to be as intense as they are during a regular school week, if you will. So things will be significantly reduced because of the nature of distance learning. And it will be up to IP teams to figure out what exactly that would look like. For parents without email, Paula, we are working on that. And that's a great question, but we'll get to that in a little bit. We will get to that as well, Carrie Lynn. Thanks so much for your questions. Some students may require an addendum without a meeting or a 504 plan to address some specific needs during distance learning. Those students may have something very specific happening. We have a few students who currently have services on 504 plans. Those students may require an updated 504 plan, but not everybody is going to need an addendum without a meeting. Fewer students will need telephone conferences, and that's the yellow part of the triangle. Those would be students who are in an initial or annual IEP or 504 plan, local screening meetings, eligibility meetings, re-eval meetings. We are hoping that teleconferences can take care of the vast majority of those needs. Some students who have unique situations that we'll talk about in just a little bit may require IEP meetings using this platform, Blackboard Collaborate. And we'll talk about what that looks like. As you guys can tell, this platform can sometimes have some difficulties. We lost Andrew's audio a while ago and folks had getting in. So we want to use it the least of all, and we'll talk about each one of these in just a second. So that letter is coming soon. We are asking that each case manager make a phone call to parents, and we'll be sending you a script as well for that to help us use common language. We'll document that conversation in the contact log, and then we'll ask you to do the letter and send it to the parent as a PDF, and then upload that the letter that was sent to historical documents. We are asking could pay attention to the naming convention that's on the slide and utilize that naming convention, and making sure it's a PDF. We are kind of broken records on this, but uploading as a PDF and utilizing kind of a same naming convention. That way these documents would be easy to find. We will send this out once it's ready to go, hopefully in the next day or two. Again, we said some students might require that addendum without a meeting. And the teleconference, and this is just a bigger version of what was in the yellow part of the pyramid. I just want to point out, if you have a transfer come in, we're hoping we won't have a lot of transfers due to the stay put order from Governor Northam, but we do recognize that sometimes we get those. Contact your DPE specialist for additional guidance on transfers. It's a little bit funky right now with those, so we want to make sure that we're working with you guys and helping you get through that process. And you can still call the 571-423-4470 number, and you'll get the appropriate specialist that way. If you look to the next to the last bullet on this slide, it talks about eligibility meetings and extension of timelines. There's an additional letter asking parents to agree to extend timelines until students can be evaluated in person. That letter will become the next day or so as well. That one does seek parent consent to extend the timelines. And we would ask that letter, once it's completed, that it be uploaded into CSTARS as well. So essentially, the outcome on that would be that we will have a lot of eligibilities once we resume school in the fall, and a lot of testing would be happening. We are looking at how we'll do summer clinic this summer, as we recognize that if we're back up and running over the summer, we will have a need for a lot more traffic at summer clinic as well. And of course, reevaluations, any that are due, would need to occur as well via teleconference. And we're going to get your question in dust a little bit, if you hang tight. So then the BBCU meetings, those would be those that address unique situations. Those might be those tougher meetings that are continued from prior to the break, and they might be to address some specific needs. We are working on a document that talks about exactly, step by step how to do an IEP meeting using this platform, and that will be coming out shortly as well. So some procedures for hosting that virtual meeting. We'd like you to contact the parent to schedule that meeting, document it on the contact log, and or the 504 documentation, and ask for anything they might want to share. You can still schedule a language interpreter, and we have that information for you as well in just a couple of slides. We are asking you to send a confirmation email with the appropriate notice letter. We did put together an IEP packet of forms that parents that are sitting on the public web, that is one single PDF of the IEP forms that parents would need, so that they can hit just one spot and be able to follow along with the meeting. We do want you to send the draft IEP home 3 to 5 days prior to the meeting if possible. One major difference here is that during this time, we are allowing you all to draft the entire IEP prior to the meeting in the hopes that it will help move the conversation along a little bit, because we know that it's this platform is a little bit awkward, and we want to be able to have the meeting be about whatever that plan is. You would send that teleconference phone number and access code ahead of time, or the BBCU participant link a couple days before the meeting. We want to make sure that you all are aware that you'll get 2 links to BBCU. One is the participant link and one is the moderator link. Make sure you don't send the moderator link out. Make sure instead you're sending out that participant link to folks. You want to make sure there's just one moderator during your meetings. And then we'll have some guidance documents coming out. I apologize, my ancient cat is howling at the door, so if you hear that, I'm so sorry. During that meeting, we're going to provide you all with some meeting norms, because we do recognize that meetings held over this platform are a little bit different, and we want to make sure that folks, everybody has a common understanding. If a parent says that they're recording or they'd like to record, go ahead and record the session, and you can do that as a moderator. And then you would record the teleconference using whatever means you would normally record something. You would conduct the IP meeting. We have tested, go back just a little bit, Andrew. We have tested C-STARS over the BBCU platform, and if you've ever participated in an IEP meeting via teleconference without being able to see what was going on, you know that it's important to speak slowly, explain what you're doing, and make sure everybody's on the same page. We do want to make sure you stick to your allotted time, because we recognize that each of you, each school has one teleconference line and one BBCU line. And so we want to make sure that you're scheduling meetings and sticking to your allotted time, because if you go over, the next team is waiting. You'll want to let parents know you'll send them a hold copy of any documents for consent after the meeting. And then consent is a little bit different, and we'll talk about that next. You'll want to send a hold copy of the document, like we said, and a completed PWN following the meeting, updating the contact log, and then confirming receipt of the documents with the parent, making sure they got what you sent and they're understanding it. And then, of course, you'll follow the rest of the process that we normally have in place for closing things out in C-STARS. Making sure you close the workflow, please and thank you. So let's talk a little bit about consent. So we did talk about, let's see here. Keep going, Andrew. Sorry about that. The teleconference meetings, just really quick, a reminder. I sent out the other night to each principal at every brick and mortar school a teleconference line that is to be a dedicated conference line for IEP and 504 meetings, or special ed and 504 meetings. Please know that these lines are expensive. These lines were provided to us very kindly by the Department of Information Technology. We have asked for additional lines, recognizing that some schools have very large populations. but we have been denied those requests. And I've received probably a dozen requests for additional lines, and unfortunately there aren't any more available. So we do ask that you all create a process to schedule the conference line, whether that runs through you as the lead teacher or the administrator, or through an AA or somebody. You definitely want to organize and make sure that folks aren't walking on top of each other as they are trying to utilize conference lines and this BBCU platform. Go ahead, Andrew.
Dawn, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm sure this will go over the recording, so if the other participants don't hear me, I apologize. We just want to make sure too, with that teleconference, I'm going to be sending out some directions from AT&T that shows you how to lock it, so that while you're having your meeting, the next meeting can't interrupt the end of your meeting. Okay, that's all.
Thank you for that, Andrew. I wasn't aware we could do that. So your SBITS would be, your SBITS is going to be your BBCU scheduler, and they will send you the links that are needed. You as the moderator or whoever is running the C-STARS meeting would still need to be VPN'd in order to access C-STARS. Everybody else should not VPN in. And then in an IEP meeting or a special ed meeting, you're going to want to disable the online chat function. I think that you're going to want those IEP meetings or special ed meetings to remain verbal as opposed to allowing folks to chat. I think they could get away from you pretty quickly if you leave the chat function open. There are directions there on your screen, and they'll be part of the the recorded session as well. And Andrew, can you send those out as well, or can we post those maybe on the DPE intranet site?
Absolutely, Dawn. For any links that are in here, I'll make sure to work with Kiana to post and put into other documentation that we'll be sending out to schools.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right. As a reminder, during these BBCU meetings that you're doing with C-STARS, like I said on a previous screen, we want to make sure that the moderator is the driver and that person is the only one VPN'd in. You'll send folks to the public site link that houses all the special ed documents so they can follow along. Be mindful about how you get into C-STARS. As I'm out in schools and attending IEP meetings and things, I often see folks hit their folders view and then go pick the kid. We want to be careful about doing that because everything you are doing in C-STARS will display for everyone who is on your session to see. So if you go in through your student view, you only are going to see that student. So be really careful about that. You might want to disconnect the C-STARS screen from other participants while you're validating and putting documents on hold. I would make sure that you assign a Plop writer if you're in a pretty significant meeting, and that person may also need to be on VPN. So you would do the usual process that we see play out a lot, where one person is writing on the Plop and the person who is projecting and sort of facilitating the meeting would hit refresh once it's ready, and you can do that in this process as well. It might be beneficial to assign a timekeeper as well, just to make sure that your meeting is going the way that you would expect it to go. So consent. You'll present the parent with the proposal. parents, one difference right now is that we are accepting verbal consent. And so you can say, you know, Mrs. Schaefer, you know, would you let us know if you agree? If you agree to this, then we'll mark it as agree, and we'll send you that in the PWN. So you are saying we are allowing parents to consent verbally. You also, if they say, you know, I'm not quite ready, you can say, okay, then you can send me an email letting me know if you agree when you're ready. That way we're not locking parents into having to actually provide a signature right now, because we recognize that's very difficult. We do know folks have the ability to sign on their iPhones sometimes, and so there may be parents who want to do that or want to print something out and sign it and scan it and email it back to you, and that's all fine too, but we want to make it a little bit easier for folks to say what they need to say. And then we want to make sure that any documents that are produced get uploaded into C-STARS if possible. We really want to try to use our tool to help us keep our records as much as possible. So here are some suggested norms for these virtual meetings, and we did talk about most of this already. As you could tell from my howling ancient cat, if you could try to reduce distractions and, you know, silence your phones and background sounds and whatever, that is helpful as we go through the meeting. And we'll have these norms available for you as well. So timelines. I think the number one question that we have been getting for the last 3 weeks is timelines. The Virginia Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Ed have put out a lot of information about timelines, and at this point, they are saying that timelines are intact. And so we are working on putting that information back out to everyone. We do have some data as well that I'll be sending out to PSLs to be shared with schools regarding, you know, things that were due between March 1st and the end of April, or were or are due, so that you all can focus this part of your work a little bit and be able to hopefully catch those pieces. And you probably know what's out there as well. And so we're hoping that the extension of the 65 business day timelines on evaluations will help with some of that. I think the logical next question is, what happens if a parent won't agree to extend the timeline? And at that point, you would go to eligibility with the information that you have. And so it may yield students who are ineligible because there is no evaluative data, and that's okay. And I think you can reassure the parent that they can refer the student again, or that we will look at the student again once we're back in person. But that's the benefit of extending the timeline, is that that student remains in the queue for evaluations to be completed. And again, that letter will be shared with you all shortly. Andrew, do you want to talk about language services?
Sure. Hopefully everybody can hear. I do apologize. So we got some information out from the Operations of Strategic Planning group that works with language services. And if you need a language interpreter, you'll go ahead and follow that protocol by emailing language interpretation at fcps.edu. And just remember that you will need to send them the teleconference link, just like you would parents and other team members. And the one thing that they wanted us to know was that interpreters are allowed to add or edit any part of the conversation. They are just kind of interpreting what that team is saying. And they have interpreters for the majority of our languages. That's it.
All right. So IT has also created a meeting infographic guide, and that the link is there as well, and you'll be able to hit that link. We do just want to make sure that you're not using Zoom. I don't know if anybody's been following the news, but there's been a whole lot of, shall we say, interesting things happening to people on Zoom calls. And we don't want you using Zoom for this sensitive information that would occur during an IEP or 504 meeting. You can use BBCU as we are right now. You could also use Google Meet to meet with students and parents. We would suggest if you could forward your desk phone if you have the FCPS VoIP phones in your building. And if you're using your home phone, which most of us don't have anymore, or you're using your cell phone, use *67 to mask your personal phone number so that you're not sharing that with folks when you call them. So we have developed department chair and lead teacher expectations and guides, and then case manager expectations that are coming soon. There's also a pretty comprehensive FAQ that will be coming out as well. And then there's a 504 case manager's action plan that will also be coming out. Literally all of these documents are in process. I wish that we could share everything with you all right now, but we have been, as I said, working on all of this information quite a bit over the last couple of weeks, and the information does change fairly frequently. So as soon as we have everything, you all will get all of that information. We know this is a stressful time, and it is for everyone. Please take time for yourself, and we want to make sure that you're practicing some self-care as well. Taking breaks. It is really tough, based on my experience the last couple of weeks, to sit in front of a computer for hours on end. So between meetings, make sure you're getting up, you're walking around, and you're taking care of yourself as you are working with students and families during this time. So DPE help is still our preferred email. If you give me just a second, I need to go take care of a child. Andrew, can you take care of this, please?
Sure, Dawn, thank you. So it would be best right now if you email dpehelp@fcps.edu. You can also email your due process and eligibility specialist, but by sending the email to that box, it basically routes it to everybody so that they can see it. If you do call due process and eligibility by phone, you'll need to leave a phone number or an email address where the specialist can, or myself or Don can get back to you. We've also provided the due process and eligibility intranet site information, as well as the Section 504 information, which I'll make sure the link is up and running. I've also added the C-STARS information, and just remember, it's probably going to be best to email them as well because they are also working off-site. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and enable the audio and enable the chat so that everybody can start asking questions. Please remember that we're going to take them one at a time, and that if we don't get to your question that you've typed in the screen or on the window today, we'll make sure that we include it in our frequent question and answer document. Okay, it looks like Carolyn Edner has the first question.
Hi, so my question is for meetings with interpreters and getting verbal consent. If the interpreter is the only person who can understand what the parent is saying, is that all right, or are we putting our interpreters into a bad position? Also, many of these parents don't have email, so what do we do for that?
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So good question. Remember, our interpreters are just telling us back what the parents are saying. So, you know, if they give us verbal consent, great. So the white elephant in the room is what you just mentioned about in terms of some parents that don't have email or a way to get paper. I think right now that's just a function of what's going on through COVID-19. The division has basically had to resort to just electronic communication. So I think what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using our verbals when we can, and then we're going to have to document that information in the PWN. Like, you gave us verbal consent on this date and time. You gave us partial consent on this date and time. So I think right now, and then we'll have to find a way to get that information to schools. But there really is no mail system. There's no way to drop documents off. So what we're asking schools to do is to maybe keep a list of, you know, documents that may need to be sent to parents once we get back to school, or once we have central office staff and AAs to assist us. So it's not ideal, but unfortunately it is what we have right now. Thank you. Jessica from Willow Springs has a question.
Hi there. My question is about the extension of the 65 days. When is that date calculated from? Because, you know, if we signed off on something at the end of February, those 65 days are still going to put us during the school year, and we still won't be able to do those evaluations.
So
Jess, sorry,
so
this is Dawn.
You want to take this one, Dawn?
Yeah, I was trying to work through some of the questions that are coming in the chat window, but I'll take this one. So that extension of the 65 days is going to, the letter essentially says we are putting this on hold until normal school resumes. And so it just will sit sort of in a queue for addressing once we're able to evaluate students. So there aren't evaluations happening right now. Almost all evaluations that we would be doing are going to be in person. And so that sort of puts a hold on any concept of being able to evaluate students. So we're asking parents to allow us to extend that timeline until school resumes, and we can test students. So unlike our previous position, which was that you can only extend the 65-day timeline for 10 days, where it's a much further out extension, if that makes sense.
Okay, so right now we're not gonna, if we apply that and parents consent across the board to any students that are open in our queue, we're not monitoring an additional date at this point until schools resume. Is that correct?
Yes. Thank you for putting that in a much more succinct way. Appreciate that.
No, it just helps me process, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And just a reminder, we're also working with the C-STARS folks to see if there's any flexibility in timelines, because we also know just the very idea of those red clocks make you all nervous. And so we're trying to apply our current situation to C-STARS as well. Grace Robb has raised her hand, and we'll take these in order in which the hands have come through. Grace Robb, go ahead.
Hi, and my question was related. Sorry, I don't know what happened. You mentioned we're providing. Can you guys hear that echo?
It sounds like Grace is having some trouble with her audio like I was having. Grace, if you can go ahead and type your question into the window, that would be great. Burns is next. Burns, you had a question for the group.
Hi, I have a question about students that have been receiving homebound services so the homebound teachers are no longer working with them, and what direction you have for those students and how do we attach them to a general education classroom? How does that work for those students and those services?
So I'm going to let Dawn handle that question.
So Burns, you asked about homebound services and what to do for those students?
Correct.
Is that, okay, thank you. I was looking at the chat window. I imagine that those students would receive the letter as well, and then we would be shifting to providing them some consultative services as we're providing to all kids. I know that question is out there, and I think we're working with Kurt Mills to figure out if the instruction goes back to the school that the student is at, or if the instruction remains with that homebound teacher. And I apologize that I'm not sure what that answer is right now.
Okay, Stephanie A. has the next question. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Hi. Is there a statement that you all would like us to put on the Plop page for IEPs that are out of timelines between March 13th and April 14th?
We'll be coming up with a statement and some information a little bit further in terms of just what we want for you to put on services page and how to document distance learning. So yes, you'll want to look for that information coming soon.
Okay, thank you.
Maureen Howard.
Hi, Andrew. This is Maureen. I had a quick question about ESY, and as we have the annual IEPs that are coming up, proposing or not proposing ESY, and then for the IEPs that we've already had that we said we would determine at a later date, do those need to be opened as addendums without meetings to change or make that decision?
So that's a really good question. What we were trying to think, if you think about Don's analogy of flying the plane as we built it, we're trying to get us kind of off the ground to address the immediate need for IEPs. We need to reach out to OSCI and figure out how we're going to deal with ESY, because we think that, and again, this is our take, it may look a little different this year. So before we get too far down, more information will be coming.
Okay, thank you.
Erin Simmons, go ahead.
Hi, Andrew. It's Erin Simons. A couple of questions, or one big question. Those red clocks that are driving us all mad because they're overdue at this point because meetings were scheduled to be had before the closure. Are those the meetings that we should prioritize first, or because they're already overdue, should we prioritize the meetings that are still not due yet? What is your guidance on that? Did you get that, Andrew?
Erin, this is Dawn. Can you ask your question again for me? I think, yeah, thank you.
Sure. I was just asking about the overdue. What is the priority? Is the priority to teleconference the overdue IEPs first, or the IEPs that are not yet overdue with these families? We've got some March IEPs that are obviously overdue at our school.
Yeah, I think everybody does. Everybody does. I got that data from our data management folks at the 4444 number, and there's a lot out there. I recognize that. I think I would I would try to balance the two. You know, starting with the stuff that is the most overdue, as well as trying to get the, you know, putting the ones that are coming due in the queue, so that you're kind of working through both, so you end up without adding any more into the overdue column, if that makes sense.
Yep, thanks so much.
Sure. Andrew, are you still there? All right, we'll go with Elizabeth Bacon.
Great, thanks. I think I saw somewhere that when we have new IEPs that we're supposed to put language in there that the services won't actually start until the beginning of the next school year, so the end of August. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then for, like, when we're doing an annual IEP and we're putting in hours for services, do we have a conversation with the parents that, you know, clearly if there's only 1 hour of online instruction a day and 1 hour of office hours a day, that the child really isn't going to be getting these, you know, 15 hours or 20 hours of services?
Right, and that's the purpose of the letter, the temporary learning plan letter. If you're having an annual or initial IEP, we want you to continue, you know, moving forward with that, because we want to make sure that that's in place when school resumes.
Okay.
We're going to give you all some language for the Plop to outline what that would look like for those students.
And then just one more question about specialized programs. My understanding from my principal is that we're really not doing the specialized program. So what should we be doing about that if we've been doing read well or language or all of that?
I think one thing that we have to, I'm going to ask Ellie, if Ellie is still on, to unmute your mic and jump in here. But I think one thing we have to remember is that the specialized programs are to address the student's goal, and the instruction and the goal isn't necessarily the program. And so it may be that we need to, we'll need to look at instruction outside of, you know, that program. Thank you, Ellie. Go ahead and unmute, because this is, you have a much more eloquent answer than I do.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm signed in as Sarah Smith because I was playing around with somebody earlier and showing them how to change their name and how it shows up in a Collaborate. And then when I came back in here this morning, I came in as Sarah without realizing it until too late. Good morning. Excellent questions. Just to give you a heads up, there is a training for teachers teaching general curriculum and for teachers teaching adapted curriculum that are on the website, the OSEI website, and I'll put that link in a chat window. But to answer this question specifically, because our programs were not designed to be provided via distance learning, we have had to work with each of our companies to get different levels of permission regarding what we can or cannot do through distance learning with our students. And each company has given us, some companies have said, no, you can't do anything. Other companies have opened their door and said, use with whoever you want. And so we are putting together guidance for schools on this regards, or in this regard, but pertaining to what Dawn said, which is so true, we are not expecting that any teacher will be providing a program with the fidelity that we were during the school year. knowing that what we are doing at home is not replicating what was going on in the classroom. For the programs that are letting us use all or a part of their programs, teachers can use parts of their programs to help meet their skill areas that our students were addressing. But there's flexibility here. We're not expecting it to look the same. We're not using the fidelity. And in many cases, like I said, we're not even able to use the whole program. So we are putting together a guide for each of the different programs and companies to let teachers know what they can do. But it's, once again, using the program in a different way in some cases, not with fidelity, to do what they can to help meet their students, the skill areas, but we know we're not doing it with fidelity, and that's okay. But I don't want to take up too much of this OSEPS time with that, but more information is coming, and you can also contact me offline.
Thank you so much, Ellie. I told you guys she was much more eloquent than me with that answer. Ashley, you're up next.
Hi, yes, can we just address how you'd like us to proceed with BIP reviews? Should that date be moved to the fall, or should a statement be put on the Plop that data is not being collected because we are not in the school setting?
I think your idea of putting that information on the Plop is a good one. I do know that OSEI was addressing BIP reviews. Unfortunately, I don't remember what the answer is to that. There's so much information going around. I apologize. Ellie, do you have that answer as well?
Unfortunately, I do not, but I am on it. If I get the answer before the end of the day, I'll let you know.
Stacy, can you type in into the chat window your last name as well, and we can try to get back to you on that. All right. I think that was somebody else. Stacy, I think you're up.
Oh, hi. It's Carter. This is
Thank you.
Hi, yeah. This is a KTA question, so I really hope this is the platform. And I also think that if the parent, presuming a kiddo that's going through initial eligibility, if the parent agrees to extend the timeline, then I know I could ask this question in August, but I just think that everything will be crazy, so I don't want to waste your time. But here's my question.
Sure.
If we have a kiddo going through eligibility initial, and we've started KTA Form A, halfway through it. So when we go back in August, again, presuming the parent agrees to the timeline extension and we're going to carry on with testing, would we then use Form B or carry on with Form A, knowing that 5 months have gone by?
That's a great question. I would think that you would continue in Form A, but KTEA is not my area of expertise. Let's see. I know we had Peggy Moore. Are you still online? I'm not seeing that called into this meeting. Casey Ryan, you also have a really good question. I see that just popped up in the chat window. We're going to get back to you guys on your KTEA questions because I'm not sure that we have a solid answer at the moment, but thanks for asking that and asking us to think about it. Jillian, you're up next.
My question has been answered. It was about timelines and then if we needed to addend like Cat B student hours. So I think I'm good.
Super. Thank you. Amy Shoker.
Hi, good morning. Quick question about data binders that are in the building for progress reports and teachers who are reaching out to get those. What would be your guidance on that?
I think at this point, you know, Governor Northam's stay-home order is in effect, and based on my reading of it, I think it impacts us as well, not being able to get back into the schools. Amy, that might be a good question to ask RAS.
Okay.
I know we were allowing folks in last week, 10 at a time across the division.
Well, we just
Okay,
went
thank
through.
you.
We went
Amy
through.
Dane Quenville just weighed in, and she said it's a principal decision right now,
Right.
and more guidance is coming.
Right, and we have, I mean, been working with individual staff members. However, I was thinking if there's going to be a statement that's going to go on the progress reports, then we could just say, while I realize you want to get this, there's a statement coming.
Yeah, I think that would make sense.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So that was the main thing I was wondering about.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Angelique Connors, you're next.
Hi, good morning. So I got here late, so this question may have been answered. I apologize. What are we doing for progress notes for third quarter?
Great question. And I see folks are typing that over in the chat window as well, so hopefully we'll be able to kind of address some of that. So third quarter progress reports are happening based on the data that you have so far, and Elizabeth just said it very nicely. I think if, and Carol Timpson, I think, had asked, Caroline Timpson had asked, what do we do if we don't have enough data? I think you have to say that, and you have to give the appropriate code if you don't have enough data to say that, and you have to put it in your comments. I think we can look at developing some language for that. But I just I want you guys to know that the idea here is that we everybody is expected, to put forward good faith efforts. We recognize it's not going to be perfection, and that everybody is struggling and everybody is trying to figure out what to do. So, I think if you just say, due to the closures, due to COVID-19, starting on March 13th, there isn't data to show progress at this time. You could also go based on what you had before. And that goes back to Amy's question a little bit.
Okay, so I have a couple more. What are we doing, and maybe the consent covers this, but when we do hold those IEP meetings, when you're supposed to initial different places, does the consent just cover those initials for parents?
Can you ask that for me again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so like when we have to do initials for they've been given the ESY or they were read that statement, does giving consent override those initials and so we're good to go with closing out the workflow and such?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then my last question, for preschool transitions and transitions from us to middle school, do we still need to contact the middle school teacher to have those meetings via Blackboard or teleconference, or how do we move forward with that, or will that come in the future?
We're working on some more specific guidance on that. We just got the data on all of the transitioning students the other day. I would say that having done that preschool to K transition and that 6 to 7 transition in a previous life, the kids that the transition is going to be pretty smooth. And you also know the kids that transition really needs a lot of conversation and planning for. I think for the kids that, that transition is smoother, you could probably offer to the parent that you can send them, you can send them the document. For kids that require the conversation, and it's a much more, you have to be much more planful and in depth. I would say for those kids, yeah, you're looking at a teleconference or a BBCU for those kids. Does that make sense?
It does. And then you said for like when we're doing a current or an IEP right now, did I hear when I first got on, someone said that there will be guidance as to what we put for hours for the rest of the school year? That's
so So that is something that I apologize, we probably weren't as clear as we could have been. The letter that the COVID-19 temporary learning plan is what will outline the services and support that'll be in place for the rest of the school year. If you're in the middle of an IEP for whatever reason, your Plop page is where you're going to outline what's happening for the rest of the school year. Does that make sense?
So then on the services page, we're not documenting any hours for the rest of this school year. They'll start in August for next school year.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Sanaz Hosseini, you're up next.
Okay, I had a question about how, so if we had an initial local screening meeting and we weren't able to hold it, and we were going to propose testing, is that something we just contact the parents and say we'll hold the meeting again in the fall?
I think so can you clarify for me if you've already held the local screening or if you need to hold the local screening?
No, it would have been it would have been an initial local screening meeting. So it was scheduled for like the 18th and we weren't able to hold it. We would have proposed testing and it was a parent referral. So how do we go about that? Do we reschedule it?
Yes, you're going to hold that local screening as soon as you can. I would suggest that you.
But then we can't test. So what is the purpose of holding that meeting?
Well, first it's a child find meeting, and we have to continue with our child find obligations. So you're considering as a local screening committee whether or not you suspect that student has a disability. So you have two paths you could take. The first path would be to say no testing, and we will look at your child again once we're back in school. The other path that you could take would be to say, yes, we suspect a disability. Yes, these are all the tests that we would like to do with your child to look at whether or not your child has a disability. And by the way, we won't be able to do any testing until we're back in the fall, and you would have the parent sign that extension of timelines letter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we can't, okay, that's fine, yeah. And then all IEPs that are due before the end of the school year, or September 30th, need to be completed this year still, correct?
Yes, that's the plan. We do recognize that we'll have a bubble over the summer for summer clinic, and we'll have a big bubble in the fall.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Michelle Botchnek, you're up next.
Hi there. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My question is around services, and maybe this will be a question better answered in the adapted curriculum, but I figured while I'm here. So for self-contained students, so enhanced thought, non-CAT, DSS, etc. I guess what the expectations for instruction. So we've been getting a lot of information about 2 hours of synchronous learning for our kids, but that's going to be really challenging. And I know our team is kind of struggling with what that expectation is. I don't know if there's any guidance from you guys on that, on what we should be doing, how we should be doing it. Yeah.
I think that's a better question for the folks in OSCI, and I'll ask Ellie if you want to weigh in. Oh, good. Lots of ideas will be shared in today's training, Ellie says. So tune in for that. Okay. And hopefully your questions will be better answered there.
All right. Thank you.
Brittany Zervulius, you're up next. Brittany, we're not able to hear you. You want to type your question in the chat window? Thank you. All right, while you're typing, Melissa Hoffman, you're up next.
I had a question about once schools resume. For those, we received parent consent for extension timelines. Do timelines resume where they left off? Like, for example, we received the parent consent to extend the timeline when 15 days were left on the timeline. Once everything's back and up and running, do we then have 15 days to finish?
That's a great question, and we're working on that. I think at this point the focus was on getting agreement to extend the timelines. I'm not sure we have figured out whether or not we get, the same amount of time that would have been left once school resumes, or if we get some other amount of time. Stay tuned for that. Thank you for that question. Grace Robb, you're up.
Regarding these letters and the IEPs that we need to have to the parent 3 to 5 days in advance, is it an electronic copy? What do we do about parents that need a hard copy because they don't have email? Who's sending out the temporary learning plan letter? If it's us, how do we print them? Where do we get the postage?
So Grace, I addressed that somebody else had typed that in the chat window, but I addressed it there. And I'm sure it got a little bit lost, so I'll address it here as well. So there is no postage, there's no mail right now, so everything is electronic. So the document, the temporary learning plan and the extension of timelines letter will come to you all as Word docs, and you'll adjust those letters. And you'll save them, in Microsoft Word, you can save things as a PDF. So you'll save them down as a PDF. My suggestion, if you don't have an electronic signature that you have developed, and some folks have, is to pick a font that you can type that looks like a signature, or find another way to get a signature on those documents, and then PDF them and send them that way. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to use the mail system right now.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. No. All right, super. Karen O'Brien, you're up.
With local screening and cases that I have signed off on, we have met on 2 separate cases where we said we would be testing and then school closed. One child is moving out of state, so what is my obligation? He will not be back in the fall. I can do a letter extension, but it doesn't help me in that situation. And the other is moving to middle school. So what happens to those kids that won't be with us for these meetings if we extend the time?
I think you're still going to extend the time. And then in the fall, when that other school contacts for records, you'll let them know that we have this in place. Does that make sense?
So even for the kid that's moving out of state?
Yeah, because the other state's going to have the same issue we do.
Okay. So they'll have to pick it up where we left off.
Yeah, and that's the obligation. All right. So, Brittany, thank you for typing your question, and I'll read it out loud. So after reading the principal FAQs for SPED, due to COVID-19, the parent of a child with a disability and the school team may agree to not convene an IEP meeting for the purpose of making IEP changes, and instead develop a written document to amend or modify the child's current IEP. That is the temporary learning plan that we were talking about. Does that make sense, folks? All right, perfect. Thank you for asking that, Brittany. Okay, 2 Katies said no. All right, so the idea is, so the language that was written in the principal's FAQ is written in a way that I think it was written prior to us developing the temporary learning plan concept. So essentially the idea is you can say, here's what we're going to do without going through the IEP. And so that's why we have this temporary learning plan in place for us to be able to outline what we'll be providing to students during this time. And that's that written document to amend or modify the current IEP. And so that temporary learning plan will show these are the goals that we're doing, these are the accommodations your child's going to receive during this time, and these are the services that we'll be providing. And again, that temporary learning plan is significantly reduced from what the child would be getting during a regular school week, because you don't have anywhere near the face time with that kid that you would normally have. And it's up to you all to figure out what that would look like based on that particular child's needs and related services and those kinds of things. Yes, Amy Harper, you would do a plan for every child. Some of those kids are kids who you're in an IEP process. So for those kids, you would be putting it on the Plop page, but the vast majority of our kids out there, it would be that temporary learning plan. Okay. So Brittany, your next question that was a follow-on on that is, do parents
putting a right to a meeting at a later time?
Yeah, if parent, I don't know who's talking. So do the parents have the right to request a meeting at a later time? If parents ask for a meeting, then yeah, you're gonna hold a meeting. But for the most part, we're hoping that the vast majority of our families, this temporary learning plan is going to be how we outline what we're doing. So Katie, number 2, you asked if parents have to agree to that temporary learning plan. That is a piece that we're still working on. The short answer is no, but we're working on the language for what that looks like. Emily, the TLP is not the same as the IEP. That's a great question, alphabet soup and special ed, but it is going to outline what we're going to do at this time. I'm looking at Courtney's question. Give me a second. Be patient, please. There are 245 people on this call. So Courtney says, I think a clarification might be, do we still need to hold an annual IEP for every student who is due? The principal letter made it sound like parents can say, I don't want an annual right now. No. If you have an annual IEP due, you need to hold the meeting. And that would be via teleconference or in some cases through this platform, because we do want to hit that timeline. But the services would start in August, and you would outline what's happening during the closure on the Plop page. Okay. The TLP is sent by you, not the county. And you do not have a copy of it yet because it's being written right now. We are still working on some of that language. All right. Burns, your hand's up again?
Yes, I have another quick question. As far as the Blackboard Collaborate Ultra versus a teleconference, and I know we talked about there's unique needs, you could use Blackboard Collaborative. Is it an option for the school, if they choose to do so, to use Blackboard Collaborative over the teleconference, or how strict should we be about which option we use?
I think you could choose to use the BBCU platform for all of your meetings, but it's pretty intense. You know, we were hoping the teleconference would be a little bit of an easier platform to use, but you could choose to go that route.
Okay.
My bigger suggestion would be to schedule both so that you can get all your meetings in and kind of figure out which ones need to be on this platform and which ones can be a teleconference.
Okay, great. And the last question is just as far as related services go, will they be getting more direct? They'll be just, I guess, pushing services also until the fall as part of that TLP?
Yes. And so if you think about, you know, like physical therapy, that's a lot of hands-on service to kids and a lot of equipment work with kids. It may be that, for example, a physical therapy service might turn into a consultation with the parent. You know, adapted PE could be a similar situation. Speech language pathologists, I think they were working on figuring out a way to provide teletherapy, and I think that's still in flux. I haven't talked to those folks in a few days, but so stay tuned for that. I think your related service provider folks probably have more updated information than I do on what related services would need to go on that temporary learning plan.
All right, excellent. Thank you for your help.
You're welcome. Kathleen Berry, you're up.
Yes, my question is for students who we were going to go through reevaluation before the end of the school year because they were going to age out of DD or they were coming up on like 6 years and hadn't been tested. Do we go ahead and just kind of roll those reevals and then revisit them in the fall? Or should we open them up, say yes to testing, and then just wait until the fall?
I think you could do both. Could take either approach. You definitely need to open those reevals when they're due. You could say no testing at this time and go straight to eligibility. You could say yes to testing and then extend the timeline so that those students fall into the queue for testing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Elizabeth Bacon, you're up.
Yes, can we get a copy of this PowerPoint today so we can share it with our team?
I wish we could. Unfortunately, we don't do the production of the recording, and there's a bit of a turnaround time on that.
Oh, well, not even the recording. Sorry, the actual, like the 32 slides. Could we get a copy of those?
We'll consider that. I'm not sure if we're able to put that out today, but we'll talk about that. Thanks for that question.
The other thing is I just want to go back to the kids. Like I have one child who is scheduled for an initial IEP. Do I need to do a temporary learning plan for him, or will all of his services will not start until August?
The second answer is probably the better one. So if you have a student who's getting an initial IEP, on the Plop page, you are going to put in what's going to happen for that kid during the closure, and then services and placement. Those dates would start in August once school hopefully resumes. Does that help?
Okay, so he still will get services. He will still get services just like the other kids with annual IEPs will get services.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Michaela Moore, you're up.
Thanks, Dawn. I just have some questions about the guidance for collecting data in the fourth quarter.
Okay.
What will that look like and what is the expectation?
I think that's probably a good question for the OSEI folks regarding how data looks. I'm going to call on Ellie again if, Ellie, you have any answers to that question. All right, so I apologize for that. I'm not sure if Ellie is still on. I think I would tune into the OSEI training. That's occurring this afternoon. I think it's this afternoon. And make sure you ask that question there. I think they're going to be addressing that. All right, thanks, Michaela. Tiffany Nias, you're up.
Hi, I have two questions. The first, I just want to confirm for verbal consent, that can apply to meetings that occurred before the closures, because we had meetings that occurred before that we hadn't received consent for.
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think we're going to have to take verbal consent at this point because of the lack of paper and the lack of email.
Okay.
So I would probably follow up with those parents that you haven't heard from yet,
okay.
From before the break, and ask, you know, we held the meeting on such and such, and we haven't heard from you. Wanted to check and see what you thought about that proposal, right?
Okay. And my second question, someone asked in the chat, as far as if parents aren't able to participate, do we still have to go through the 3 attempts to hold the IEP if we scheduled and confirmed with parents and then they're not answering or they're not joining in when we hold the meeting?
I would probably go ahead and do that. Yeah.
Do the 3 attempts?
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
You're welcome. Katie Blandon, you're up. Katie, I can't hear you. Can you type your question in the chat window or turn your mic on?
Oh, yes, I'm here now. Sorry about that.
Okay, go ahead.
My question is for students who receive pull-out reading and math. And I know we're not doing the programs now, but is the expectation that during their reading time virtually, they're with the SPED teacher in their Blackboard site, or are they with their gen ed teacher during that time? Or are they expected to kind of do different times throughout the day?
I think that's a great question. I think you're going to have to collaborate with your general ed colleague to figure out times for working with kids. And Ellie, did you hear that question that was just asked about kids who need the direct instruction? You know, is there, can you ask your question again now that Ellie is back? I worry she missed part of your question.
Yes, I did not hear the question. Sorry.
Okay. Can you ask your question again? I think it was Katie. I apologize.
Yes, can you hear me now? I'm sorry, I'm here.
Yes. Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead and ask your question again now that Ellie's back.
Okay, so my question is, students who receive reading and writing pull-out support, when do they log in virtually? Like, are they logging in with the special ed teacher at that 30 minutes, or are they logging with their gen ed teacher, or both times?
And Ellie, that was the, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Ellie, that's the question that I had said that you probably need to collaborate and figure out what works out for between you and the gen ed colleague, but I wanted you to weigh in on that.
Nope, you're exactly right. You're going to have to work with your colleagues and then, you know, work with the families to see what's going to work. We have a number of teachers who have already started putting together asynchronous, so not live, but different ways of providing some instruction to work on some of the skills. But
Okay,
yes, we'll cover that in our training.
My second question is, like, using our IAs as well, since I teach multiple grade levels with reading and math, and that would mean I'm virtually online all morning if I'm with my gen ed teacher that I teach with. Are we able to utilize our IAs to be in virtually and help, or what's the rule with IAs during distance learning?
Dawn, do you want me to take that one too? Can you all hear me? Okay, not sure if Dawn's still here, but so we are in the midst of putting together guidance, or not guidance, but ideas for how to use paraprofessionals. You can certainly continue to use paraprofessionals like you have during the school year, keeping in mind, you know your paraprofessionals. We don't know, their technology skills, but also availability, since Fairfax has not provided laptops across the board to all paraprofessionals. So there are a variety of different ways that a paraprofessional can support you in your instruction, and that is something that we're not going to address too much at our training this afternoon, but we do have additional guidance coming out. In fact, in my email queue is waiting for me to approve the final training that's going to be coming out. So yes, you can use them. We just need to be flexible and creative in ways that we can use them. Dawn, are you back? All right, so while we wait for Dawn, there was a data question earlier that I tried to answer, but my microphone turned out. Regarding data, we are going to cover this in our training. And those of you that know me, I'm going to keep talking until Dawn or Andrew kick me off. But regarding data collection, one of the things, and I forget if Dawn or Andrew said this already, is we are asking teachers to keep track of their interactions with the students, whether it's through a synchronous, so a live session like what we're doing now, asynchronous, or phone calls, just to keep track of what you have done with the students generally. You know, worked on math skills, 20 minutes synchronous, or, you know, just some general feel for that. We are, both of our groups have put together a general form that's optional for parents, sort of like a reading log, or how the child or parent, depending on the student's ability, might keep track of what the student's doing at home. But as our guidance for general ed students is that no work over this distance learning time is graded, we're also not requiring that our parents of students with disabilities keep track of the work their students are doing. But we thought something that is similar to a summer reading log would be sort of a fun way for kids to keep track of what they're doing. And then as we do come back and have conversations, you know, we can also use that as a data point to see what was done. So Emily, yep, the information I just shared is for both Cat A and Cat B. For those of you that are with preschool, I know they also have some forms that they're going to be sharing this afternoon in their sessions. So this afternoon there are live trainings by region for preschool, that preschool class-based, preschool resource, as well as our PAC. And then this afternoon we have, we do have our adapted curriculum training that's live, and then the general curriculum training is pre-recorded. Regarding behavior and emotional goals, we do have some supports available for those as well. Those trainings are actually going to be in 24/7. If you haven't visited the distance learning resource folder in 24/7, I encourage you to do so. FCPS 24/7, when you log in, you'll see what looks like a blue map, and that's your distance learning resource or support center. Click on distance learning resource, select your grade level, elementary or middle. If you're a Cat A, and you're asking about behavioral supports, you're going to go down, you'll see a behavior intervention section. And if you're Cat B or more adapted curriculum, it will be included in the adapted curriculum section. But we do have resources. And Grace, yes, 24/7 is Blackboard. I don't know the official, I've seen it written in so many different ways over the last 3 weeks. All right, Dawn or Andrew, either one of you back?
Ellie, I'm back. Can you guys hear me?
Now I can, yes.
Super. I had to close everything out and come right back in. So I unfortunately lost all the great traffic that was going on in the chat window with that refresh. But yep, I see you, Katie Shea. You're in the line. Sarah Leibold, you're up next.
Hey there, my question was about students who are currently in the middle of testing and then those extension letters. So would we just send out those letters to any student in the middle of testing, or would we expect to have an eligibility meeting and then propose or ask the parent to sign that consent during the meeting?
I would suggest a phone call to those parents and then send them that letter. I think that's probably the most efficient way to handle that.
So then no meeting would be required?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Maria Irby, you're up next.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
So my question is more about small groups and pullout. I know at our school, our principal is having all the gen ed teachers have virtual classrooms, and we don't really have a classroom that we can use as a special ed teacher. So what role do you suggest for special ed teachers to have in this situation, do we just support the general education teacher and support them when they're doing their hour of support in the classroom, or are we just doing, worksheets or just resources for parents? That's kind of my question for that.
I think that's a great question. That's an instructional question. I'm going to ask Ellie to address, or to let you know that that'll be addressed in the later trainings today.
So just real quick, one of the things is hearing that you don't have your own Blackboard Collaborate, then work with your gen ed colleagues, but also through phone calls home with your parents. You can help them, give them some strategies to help differentiate. For those of you that are able to get a way to do it synchronously, you can also do it that way. It's really using the flexibility and what's going to work at your school and for your students. And then we also have the ability to post asynchronous or like recorded PowerPoints. So a couple of different ways, but really we're doing the best that we can to meet our students' needs. And so certainly reach out to the instructional team if you need help with some brainstorming or problem solving a little bit.
Thanks, Ellie. Katie Shea, you're up.
Thank you. So we are a CSS site, and we have a lot of IEPs on the docket for potential incoming CSS students, as well as some who are currently at our site who may, the team was determining an alternative level of service. And I know everything is backlogged right now, and we have a lot of priorities. And I guess my question is, would we proceed with those IEPs between now and June in terms of having the most appropriate placement for the start of the next school year? Or would we be holding off on those IEPs until the start of the school year?
I would say if you have those IEPs in queue and they need to happen, then go ahead and hold those meetings.
Okay, great. And my next question real quickly is about the FBAs, and I know we're going to get more guidance on that, but we have some FBAs that were proposed, and I'm just wondering, would we proceed with that meeting and develop a behavior intervention plan, or would we reconvene, within the first quarter with updated data? Because a lot of time is going to pass between what we would propose now and what things may look like in the fall.
Right. And I think that what you're saying makes total sense to me in terms of an FBA and BIP. Ellie, did you have any additional guidance on that, or is that going to be addressed in a later training today?
More guidance is going to be coming on that. It's not still being developed.
Okay. Thanks, Ellie. Stephanie A., you're up.
Hi, thank you. This is Stephanie. My question is regarding data for third quarter progress reports. What if all of your data is at school because you didn't bring it home?
Yeah. According to, and Jane Quenville was on the line. I don't know if she's still on the line, but in a previous spot in the chat window, right around the time Amy Shoker was asking her question about the same thing, is that it's up to principals as to whether or not you're allowed to come to the building and get your stuff. I would certainly start with your principal on that. And Ellie says schools are looking at the possibility to bring teachers in for essential things. So I would start with your principal for sure and ask that question. If you're not able to get into your building, you're going to need to say that on those progress reports, unfortunately. And it, I would think it would be something like data is not available, and therefore, this student is receiving a 1 or a 2, probably a 2, if you don't have it, unfortunately. But I would certainly start with your principal.
That makes sense. And then my follow-up would be, if we are writing IEP, like new IEPs to keep it within timelines, how do you guys suggest we proceed? Because obviously, I don't have any data for what my kid's current reading level is, or, the last time I did a DRA with them was January during the winter window. I don't want to say, are we writing IEP light type goals and then readdressing them in the fall, but what guidance would you guys provide in terms of new type of goals?
So I think you're going to have to go based on the data that you have.
Okay.
And reference the last DRA was January 2020. A new DRA will be done in the fall when students return, and just it's going to have to be, this is what we have, and this is how we're proceeding. I think if you keep in mind that everybody is putting forth their best good faith effort, and that we'll have a lot of things that will need to be addressed once we're back to face-to-face school, if you will.
And I guess I could just be upfront with parents and just sort of starting the meeting with that. And obviously I know IEPs are always working documents. We can always addenda as needed, but this is what we're proposing. And if it's not applicable once we get back to school, we'll just do an addendum.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay.
Jane Quenville, you were going to talk. You were going to address the building use at this point. I appreciate that. If you could unmute and talk to that.
Yeah, no problem, Dawn. I think most principals are being pretty cautious about letting folks back into the building. I know teachers are clamoring to get in there, but we have to be safety first, and everyone's health has to come before anything else. And so I know it goes against our grain, but you're just going to have to let go and document, like Dawn said. And the data's not available. I know. I went back and forth personally about letting my teachers in again, and I just said no, because the numbers are going up exponentially, and it's just not worth it. And so at this time, we did get some guidance yesterday from leadership, and they're going to be coming out with some more guidance from principals on getting into buildings and so forth. But that's kind of where we are right now. Yeah, Dawn, can you clarify what the end date on an IEP would be if we hold it, let's say, on April 15th? We're going to start it in August, and we're ending it when?
I would say if you do the IEP on April 15th, your review date would be April 15th of next year, with services running August, I don't know if it's the 25th, 26th this year, through April 15th of next year. So you wouldn't put, and somebody had asked earlier, that first line, does that include this year? No. Right. There is no first line. You're just doing whatever the remainder of next school year would be until the IEP would be due. Yeah. Sorry, Jane, what were you going to say?
No, perfect. Thank you. That's what I thought.
Sure. Yes, Katie, number 2, C-STARS will allow that. We regularly do that in summer clinic when we're doing IEPs that start when school starts. So, yeah, we're pretty sure we can do that. Angelique Connors, you had a question?
Yes. So you said we are only sending stuff via email. I'm a Title I school. We've been calling our families and seeing what they have at home, and many of our families do not have internet. So how am I supposed to send the learning plan, the IEPs, all of these things if we are not doing mail?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. We are working with what we have. if those parents have smartphones, they could receive it on their smartphone through email. I think most folks do have smartphones, even if they don't have home internet.
So then we need to just make sure that we, like when we do our quarter 3 progress notes, when we write that draft IEP, we just download it as a PDF and just send it to them along with all the IEP documents.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're gonna, yeah. Kristen Benink, I saw you were next, and I don't know what happened to you, so why don't you go ahead and unmute and ask your question?
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is, are parents allowed to refer students to local screening during this time?
Yes. Excuse me. Yes, they are.
Okay. And then when is that OSEI training that keeps getting referenced? I think I've heard a couple of different days and times. Can you just clarify when that is?
I believe that the OSEI trainings are this afternoon, and Ellie, thanks for weighing in on that.
Is Ellie answering?
Oh, Ellie says the general curriculum is posted and can be watched anytime. Are you on, Ellie?
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I was typing the answer. So general curriculum's posted, can watch anytime. Early childhood, so preschool, that's PAC, early childhood classroom, class-based and resource. That is this afternoon. And then adapted curriculum for elementary is this afternoon at 2 o'clock, but it will be recorded. And then we'll do a secondary session tomorrow. So if you can't make it today, you can watch the recording or join us tomorrow. I'll type all that in.
Thanks, Ellie. Are these the trainings that were referenced in the infogram that went out the other day with that link?
Yes.
Okay, so all that's there. Okay, I just want to make sure that was the same training that's what's being referenced now. My last question is, I'm trying to get clarity on ATS services. So what I'm asking specifically is, we have a lot of kids that access ATS services. So are we providing them the laptops that has the co-writer and things like that downloaded on it, or how are we going about that, or is there not guidance yet on that?
I think that's a great question, and I know we've been discussing how to get materials to kids. Ellie, do you have any updates on that, or is it kind of going the same route as not allowing folks back into schools to get materials? And Anjali, you said you got an email about that yesterday. I don't know. Oh, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have the latest on that piece. Again, there's so much going on. Ellie, do you weigh in?
Yeah, the directors are actually talking about it. I think at now, our directors in the Department of Special Services were meeting with our Assistant Superintendent, Teresa, I believe at 11 o'clock, and I know this was one of the key items on the agenda. This has been a hot issue, wondering how we can get essential materials to our students. But, you know, every time the governor updates his message, that updates or impacts our abilities. And we heard Jane Quenneville, who's the great principal over at Kilmer Center, you know, just her perspective as a principal. So they are looking into this, and guidance will be coming, and never hesitate to reach out to your related service providers with specific questions.
Hello, is anybody there?
Yes, Andrew, I can hear you.
Okay, just trying to deal with my network stuff here at home. I'm sorry, guys.
What?
Don't worry, Andrew, all is forgiven.
Okay.
You just have to supply us all with ice cream and chocolate bars for the rest of the school year.
That's sweet. Okay, Annette, do you have a question?
Good morning. I saw someone else ask a question as well. So we're waiting on documentation to be able to document things on the Plop and so forth. When's the first day that we can schedule IEPs?
I'm thinking that right now, we're not really back yet. Next week's spring break, you can start when we get back to school. I'm sorry, when school starts, for the distance learning starts that Tuesday after spring break.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Emily?
Oh, hi, Andrew. It's Emily Jones. How are you?
Okay, just a bunch of network hiccups this morning. I'm sorry, guys. How can I help, Emily?
So I just see a bunch of questions in the chat line, and I know we've touched on this through a couple different questions, but just really looking for that clarity on Cat A service hours. So wondering if are we required or expected to work with students in a one-on-one or small group setting addressing those IEP goals? For example, some teachers are doing these live, focus lessons for math, a general education teacher. Is the expectation that I am doing live direct instruction with my special education students?
So it's going to look a lot different during distance learning. So that is one option. You kind of do a small group. You can work with them individually, but remember that distance learning plan, that the temporary learning plan that we're going to be sending out to schools is going to have to be able to address what instruction would look like now during distance learning. So it might not accurately reflect what's on the IEP because we're just not able to deliver that same type of service or setting. So I think we try as best as we can, but it really is going to look different.
So just to follow up, if I have a parent saying, I see that the gen ed math class will be from 10 to 11, when is your half hour with my student? Please tell me a time. Is the expectation that I'm scheduling that time with the student just to make sure we streamline it, at least for my teachers across the school, wanting to make sure that everybody's on the same page, so one student isn't getting this one-on-one instruction and another student is not?
No, it is trying to make sure that you are providing their instruction one-on-one, but again, the amount, the frequency, and may look a lot different. Okay. So I think you're kind of working with each parent to figure out, what is we keep going back to the guidance that the state and the federal government is giving us, and it's flexibility and being able to make that attempt. So what will it look like for those students? But it's not, that's why that temporary learning plan is going to have to be a little more realistic about what we're putting down, because we know that it just might not be possible based on the current schedule that the county has for them receiving online instruction.
Sure, and then just my last follow-up, and I see people are asking it too in the questions. So because you obviously can't do a Blackboard collaborate with more than one student, because teachers can, other kids can see their names or see their videos or see who's joining the session. Would the expectation be that that's more in a one-on-one setting, or is there advice for how to make that confidential?
So one of the things that I remember, I don't know if Ellie's still on the line, but I believe we had a conversation about, sometimes we still could do some small group instruction, but what we do is we want to make sure that they're not, giving out too much information. So maybe you use, student one or their first name. Let's see, Ellie, are you still on the line?
I am, Andrew, and I'm glad that you're thinking about this. We have been told, and I saw Dawn did verify it in the chat window. It's okay as long as you're using first names. You don't want to be using full names. And then when posting stuff on 24/7, I agree with Andrew. If you're going to post something, I would then do student 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then tell your parents which materials they should be downloading. But it is okay to do synchronous and be using first names.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, it looks like Ann King has the next question.
Hi, Andrew. This is a question about placement.
if we were in the process of a reevaluation or a initial eligibility, which would have had eligibility like later in the school year, like late May, and we were thinking about an alternative placement, how should we proceed with that? Just wait till next year or whatever, or?
So clearly the placement wouldn't happen this year. So you could go ahead and document your placement on the placement tab in terms of the start date would be next school year. But we still need to think about what we're going to do on the Plop page or in that temporary learning plan between now and the end of the school year.
Okay. Thank you.
Carol Ann Timpson is next.
Good morning. I have two questions. I'm just a little confused about the temporary learning plans. If we've been in contact with parents and they're good with what's going on, do we have to do one for a student?
Yes, because what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're documenting our attempts to reach out to the parent and give the parent the opportunity to have input, and we want to document that process. You know,
So,
I like
so every
that.
student with an IEP gets a temporary learning plan?
That is correct. Now, again, they're all going to look different based on the student's needs, but we want to be able to show that we made a good faith effort, and by sending out that temporary learning plan, we're also inviting the parent to say, no, I disagree, or I'd like to go to IEP because I've got concerns. Because, you know, we haven't really gotten reprieve on any procedural obligations that we have. So it is something that we have to send out to everyone, and making sure that it's uploaded into C-STARS with that naming convention that we had in there.
Okay, and then my other question has to do with the contact log.
Okay.
Are we only putting in C-STARS the contact log for information like the temporary learning plan and paperwork, like for if we have local screening, the letters and that? Or are we putting, like, at my school, we've already all contacted our children on our caseload several times, or we don't have to document that in that C-STARS contact log?
I think you continue to use C-STARS to document any of your procedural contacts that you make with the parents.
Okay.
So what I would do is, you know, you still have to formally reach out to the parent to discuss the temporary learning plan. So I would make sure that you have that in there, but you're not filling out the contact log when you're providing instruction or individualized instruction.
So for the temporary learning plan, where will we find that? Or
so it, as Dawn mentioned a little earlier, I'm assuming she did while I was resetting the router here in the house. What we're still working on the language.
Okay,
and,
that's what I thought.
Yeah, and once that language is vetted, I could imagine that there will be a couple of principals associations. You know, so we'll make sure to get that out to you. Just know that we realize that it is necessary for you guys to have it like yesterday, but it really has to be vetted through legal and our cabinet. So, okay.
So we just do it the best we can do when we get it.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And remember, we're going to have some office hours just like anybody else in OSCI.
No,
so
this is the
and,
first
and,
meeting.
and
This
that
is still
contact
going on.
information. So you're going to want to make sure that, you know, if you have questions, you'll reach out.
The next
Okay,
one's going to
thank
come
you.
up in 2. Like, oh my God.
Okay, Jessica, you have a question?
I know my question is looking more towards the future. My question is, if we have this extension of 65 days and we cannot find students eligible until the school year begins again, I know for us, we have some students with pretty significant needs that are in the process initially right now. I'm worried about our staffing for next year and our ability to advocate for what we'll need without actually having students eligible. So is there any plan going forward for that?
Good question. You know, right now, the division is in the middle of staffing. What they also know is that we're going to have to look a little differently based on, some of the numbers that are coming in now. I think it may be a little premature to worry about staffing because this is kind of unprecedented. So what we don't know is the impact of what this is going to look like. But the nice part about it, if there's a silver lining here, is that every single school is going to be in the same situation. So I know that our school leadership is working to find ways to address this issue. And I know that our OSEPS leaders have also been working with Teresa to talk about staffing and what the impacts might be during this time.
Thank you.
Karen Ramsey, you have a question?
Yes, I'm sorry. It may have been up in the chat and I couldn't find it. I'm still confused. When we open those annual IEPs, what is our conversation around extended school year for this year?
So for right now, I don't know if Ellie's still on the line, and I was kind of in and out. But what I had been saying to folks is we just may need to hold off until we get a little bit more guidance.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Well, unfortunately, we need to really kind of figure out, when we don't know how long this is going to last. We're hoping it doesn't last very much longer. But we have to think about our long-term plan of whether or not we may have additional students going into ESY as a result of this. But we're not ready yet as a department to provide that information just yet.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Erin Van Allen?
Hey, Andrew. I was just wondering, with the services, we were told that we're only online or not online, but we have face-to-face time with students for an hour a day.
Okay.
Is the special ed expectation that we provide more face time than 1 hour a day? Because if I'm thinking about my classroom and my students, I'm running 4 different programs every single day just for reading. And I realize we're not doing programs now, but I'm in a non-CAT setting with kids on the SOL track and kids on BAP track. So having kind of meeting everybody's needs within that 1 hour is not realistic. And I'm sure everybody's kind of running into the same thing where the expectations just aren't really clear about how to provide the service hours.
So, one of those things is like, I don't know if you heard Dawn talk about it earlier in the session, but we're kind of, some of these services will be more of like a monitor consult type situation or setting. And the other thing that we need to kind of consider is we wouldn't be offering more time than the general education students are getting. So I think what we need to do is think about it and say, all right, if all the general education students are receiving an hour, what then are we going to have to do? What will it look like over the week or even the month? And you can't use the term comparable because there isn't any comparable service during this time.
Right.
But again, what can we do in that temporary learning plan to ensure that that student receives some regular special education services? But it's going to look different based on the time and the amount.
So then would it be appropriate, if I'm thinking about like just a small caseload, if you had maybe 10 students on your caseload, could you do on the temporary learning plan, could you have 2 students that you're meeting with on Monday, a different set of 2 students on Tuesday, a different set on Wednesday, and then Thursday?
Sure. Absolutely.
So like you're only getting FaceTime with them once a week, but you're giving them that direct instruction once a week?
Absolutely, yes. Because
okay, and then my other question is for addendums, I'm sorry, let me think about how I'm going to word this. When we are creating the temporary learning plan, how do we distinguish between doing just a temporary learning plan or doing an IEP addendum to address all of these needs? In that triangle on one of the first slides, it looked like addendums would be needed for small, select few students. How do we distinguish which students specifically needed that addendum?
So good question. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to the slide here just so that you can see it. One of the things that I would say is the very bottom is the one, the expectation that everybody gets every student with an IEP gets that temporary learning plan.
Right.
Now, in terms of what's in the green box or the yellow box, just kind of depends on that idea of, all right, so once we reached out to the parent with the temporary learning plan, we believe a majority are going to be like, I get it, I understand, because some of them are like us, you know, at home working with kids. The reality is going to set in that it may be really hard on their end to get them set up at home. So then what's going to happen is you're going to have some parents that say, great, this works. However, is there a way that the IEP team or individually might have to look at, you know, an accommodation for extended learning? And if that was the case, if you receive that information back and the IEP team is in consensus, you can follow your addendum without a meeting process. Instead of calling them, you can send an email and say, I got your temporary learning plan back. I see that you're okay with the amount of time that we're going to provide services and supports, but I see that you want him to have, I don't know, access to access to a dictionary or something like that, or, you know, can you provide me with some online, you know, dictionary sites, whatever. If that's what the team is okay with, then you follow your addendum without a meeting process.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for clarifying.
Yeah. And then what I would say is the fewer are those ones where the parent says, and look, let's be honest, they're going to happen, right? I don't like the temporary learning plan. It's not fair. I want to go and have a full IEP. Then we'll go into the yellow and we'll set a conference lineup to have a full IEP. But we may be proposing what we've always proposed using the data that we have. And really, we are going to give you that information to say, you know, during these unprecedented times, we're not able to provide with the full IEP. And look, they'll still have their dispute resolution options available to them, like a due process hearing or state complaints or things like that. But one of the things that the feds have been very clear is that as long as we make the attempt to communicate and get their feedback, and we may not be able to do very much than what we're providing in the temporary learning plan, but we're going to be documenting it.
Gotcha.
Get it?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Sure, no problem. Amy Harper, I see that you have a question.
Hi, Andrew. Yes, I have a technical question.
Yes.
When we're in the Blackboard Collaborate Ultra meeting, we have opened Chrome and we're not to be on VPN. So how do we open C-Stars?
So very good question. So you are right that there is kind of this, you know, unwritten rule that you should never be VPN'd in and while you're accessing Blackboard Collaborate. That's correct, except the problem is that for the person that's driving C-Stars and needs to demonstrate C-Stars, that one person will need to be logged in, and they can use Chrome with C-Stars, and they'll need to be VPN'd in. We have reached out to IT, and we have explained our situation to them. And one of the things that they're going to be doing is they're going to be monitoring the traffic on the internet from VPN. And what they've said to us is, if we find that the highway gets really bogged down on VPN due to C-Stars, we will go ahead and try to add more lanes. But I think that's why, if you look at this screen right now, we really want you to use those telephone conferences to hold our IEP meetings or addendums, because we know that even when we're going to be connected, even that one person, it's still going to be kind of slow. So we're hoping that you're going to use all the other methods, like you can use, Google Meet. We've given you a teleconference. You can send documents home and have a conversation over email. You're going to be drafting a lot of these documents ahead of time with the understanding that it really will be a draft until parent signs. But I think walking away today, understanding that our expectations is for you to use this tool as the least amount of time as possible. But when you do, yes, you will. One person and one person only will have to be VPN'd in. Okay.
Okay. We're trying not to tie up the VPN. That's helpful to know. And we're going to be on Chrome for C-Stars and for
Black. So, you know, Amy, for years we told you guys never to use Chrome with C-Stars, but as Chrome is, you know, becoming more prominent on the web, C-Stars is starting to adapt, and we hope at some point it will become, you know, the primary tool. But I think we got to get through this first.
Great, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Chrissy, you have a question.
I do, thank you. When we're looking, you had stated before, or somebody else had, that when we're looking at the service hours and start dates for both initial and annual IEPs, we're starting it in the fall, correct?
Correct.
So when we're looking at, let's say, the preschool transition meetings, when we're going to be putting the kindergarten hours into our service plan to start in the fall and no preschool hours for preschool finishing out the school year, we'd be putting that temporary plan in the Plop. Is that correct?
So let me clarify. Let's separate out the initials from the annuals.
Okay.
On the annuals, okay, on the annuals, you will continue to document the service amount, the service time that's there, okay, that the student had. So what I'm trying to say is, if the kid's up for an annual right now and has so many hours listed this particular school year on the service page, we don't take away. We leave them alone, but that anything else that's new or that we're proposing services, we start them in the fall. We then document what we have on the Plop that we're going to do for this particular the rest of the school year to address distance learning. And the reason why we're saying that is we don't want you to amend to take away any current services, because that would have a big impact on our staffing, right? So instead, you're going to leave what's there alone and then start anything that's new in August, but acknowledge that we're going to be doing something different during this distance learning time. Make sense?
Okay, yes, let me just clarify. So then on the services page, I would be putting preschool services and keeping the same times that we have currently. And then on the Plop, kind of defining out, even though it says this, for this time being, this is our temporary plan. Is that correct?
Exactly. And we're doing that because we want to make sure that we keep the numbers in place, so as they start looking at staffing for next year, they do the comparison of what we had this year versus next year, and then bounce it against enrollments. Now, for those initials or those newly eligible students, you definitely are going to not put anything for the remainder of the school year on the services page, and you're going to start all of your services in August. And then you would continue to say, okay, but between now and then, this is the amount of time that we're going to use for distance learning on the Plop.
Okay, so we're not adding the new services to start now, but we are providing services.
That's right. And even though they'll be on the Plop, legally we are, it's just what we're trying to do is we want to be able to say the distance learning plan, the temporary learning plan, serves two purposes. One, we want to make sure, and we have a feeling that for especially our Cat A kids, we're hoping that there's no changes to the IEP at all. It's just, there's services on there for the remainder of the school year, but this temporary learning plan's taking the place. The only time we really have to fiddle with services is if we've opened up an addendum or we've opened up an annual to address something else, and then we might want to say, yes, we're going to keep those on there because that was there on the services page for this year. We're going to add an additional service starting August, and we're just going to clarify what the student is getting now during distance learning on the Plop. So, yeah, clear as mud.
If you had, Yeah, exactly. If you had a student that there was discussion already, an IEP set, and you were looking at changing services at that IEP, would you nix that at this point and just keep the old services? Or would you switch the hours like there was already a discussion for to start now and then document in the Plop?
So we would consider the services, right? And if the services are new, they're going to start in August. Okay.
But I guess my confusion is because of preschool, we were looking to reduce services for this in particular student and then have at the transition piece. So for right now in preschool, we were going to reduce services and then start the kindergarten in the fall. How do I go about that?
So I want to, let's go ahead and let me take that question, and I want to involve early childhood, and I want to involve somebody else because I do see the conundrum here, and let me get back to you, okay?
Give me an hour at least to walk.
All right, and everybody, we can still hear you if your mic is enabled. So, Brett,
12, he's doing questions and answers.
Oh, Brett?
Hi, Andrew. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
With regards to progress reports, I know that we're finishing out the third quarter progress reports with the data that we have as of March 13th, and we're noting that in the third quarter progress reports. With regards to fourth quarter progress reports and seeing that services will be starting at the beginning of next year, what should we be thinking about in terms of fourth quarter progress reports at the end of this year?
Good question. So remember, there are no fourth quarter. So let's always think about IEP progress reports in terms of this one principle. IEP progress reports must be provided as many times as general education students receive progress or grades. So because the division has elected not to give fourth quarter grades, we are not required to give progress reports. Now, what we could do for that particular fourth quarter box on the progress report would go ahead and maybe give the student a 1 and say that due to COVID-19, no instruction is provided.
Okay, thank you.
Erin Van Allen, go ahead.
Hi, yes, sorry. One last question. It's come up a couple of times with retention. If parents, being that students are missing a significant chunk of school and we're implementing distance learning to the best of our abilities, is there, and knowing that retention is not best practices, is there any common language that you guys could provide us if parents are kind of wanting to have that conversation, even though it's not an IEP decision, if they're asking those questions, or should we kind of guide them towards our PSLs more or our admin team?
I think we need to start with the admin team because remember, retention is not an IEP decision. So we're going to start there, but I think our principals will need some information to help them with that language, and we'll do that. So folks, it is now 12:23. My secondary training is starting at 1 o'clock. I need to make sure that we clear out this room for our secondary folks. This information will be recorded and posted online, as well as the secondary one. So I need to disconnect and load the secondary PowerPoint. It's not different. There's actually about 2 slides that pertain just to secondary, but I'd like for everybody at this time to go ahead and log off. And if you're on early for secondary, you'll need to log back in about 5 minutes. Thank you very much for joining us, and I appreciate all of the questions.